Hello, I'm Luke Fraser, winner of the US Masters 2023. Welcome to the Masters Tools, a silly little YouTube series where I talk about sort of whatever interests me, and hopefully it'll interest some of you. So, in this, our inaugural episode, I am going to discuss how to beat Trident Realm. It's sort of an uncommon army. So if you happen to be out there in a meta without any regular Trident Realm players, like a lot of people are, then hopefully this is a good guide to, you know, give you a slightly better idea of what to expect. Okay, disclaimer, I do play with a fairly limited selection of the Trident Realm list. And one thing about Trident Realm players is we absolutely cannot agree on the correct way to play the faction. So this may not help you against everybody, but at the very least, it'll help you against me specifically. So let's get into it. It's a weird list, right? It's really unlike any other list in the game. It's not that common. It's really easy to get frustrated with if you're first starting out. Um, yeah, until you have experience with it, it can really catch you out. So we're going to go over, roughly speaking, three approaches, sort of like the way it survives, the way it deals damage, and then the way it controls the board. So first up, we've got defense. The absolute most critical element of the Trident Realm army is Ensnare. You all know what Ensnare does. It's -1 to hit in melee front critically. But just knowing that really doesn't tell you everything you need to know about it. Until you've dealt with it enough times to internalize the math, it can really catch you out. So you can see here, I've got a nice little graphic, uh, three different sort of normal-ish attack profiles going into the front of a unit with Ensnare and melee. So as you can see, the Thule, the bottom example of each of these cases, from hard-hitting units can take comparably little damage, or less damage, in fact, than defense 5. So, uh, although a lot of the ensnare units in Trident Realm are defense 3, uh, they can still be really, really resilient. This is, of course, exacerbated wildly if you ensnare is combined with hindered. So, if you find yourself playing against a Trident Realm player, uh, facing the prospect of charging an ensnare unit in difficult terrain or behind an obstacle, uh, really, really take the time to do the math and know what your expected damage comes out to. The other thing that you can see here is in the bottom example, uh, this is a horde of foot guard with no two-handed weapons, so just melee 3, 0 crush. You can see here that it is as good against Thule as Soul Reavers are. So the melee profile can play a huge role in how you affect or how you deal with Trident Realm units. An interesting example is from Masters Game 4 against Marcelo. He had two regiments of Order of Redemption, the super elite Green Lady Cavalry. He gave one of them the Brew of Sharpness, which is the absolute last thing I want to see as a Trident Realm player, because melee 2 goes to melee 3 with Ensnare, and that's still plenty accurate to get the job done. Like, Trident Realm is not afraid of crushing strength because so often, and the truth is that um, different units really specialize in different areas. But speaking of Ensnare, which a lot of the list has, crushing strength doesn't really matter because you're dealing with defense 3 or defense 2 in some cases. So it's really important to think about what targets you're attacking, what tools you have available to go into them. So that covers ensnare, and again, like, frankly, do the math. It takes some time, but figure out your expected values going into ensnare. Um, However, ensnare is only one of the extremely skewed and specialized defenses in the list. You'll see a fair bit of or is it just one? Anyways, Gigas have big shield, and Placoderms are defense 6 with Phalanx. So again, super super tough, uh, but crushing strength is good into them. So make sure that you are using the tools in your list going into the correct targets. Uh, Now, it sort of toes into the control playstyle, but one thing that I, as a Trident Realm player, really want to do is take a little bit of damage spread across my entire list. Uh, my absolute best games, I use every single one of my damage styles. Every unit takes sort of 4 to 7 damage, somewhere in that range, where they're not wavering, they're not super in danger of breaking, but they take one solid knock on the jaw. And in that way, um, because the specialized defenses really contribute towards a moderate level of toughness, even in some ostensibly fragile units, if you can spread out the incoming damage sufficiently, you can lose 0 units, and they're all at full fighting strength. In that way, you win fundamentally. Next up, offense. So once again, Trident Realm is a weird list. Not as weird as the defense level, but fundamentally, the list has no conventional hammers. Like the Thule formation, you could argue, is hammer adjacent for sure. You can give the Brew of Sharpness to a horde of Dambusters, and they're basically a conventional hammer. Hitting on threes with Rush 1, Thunder 2. Like it's good. But the list just is not built with one of those options like Slave Guardians or Soul Reavers, Whites. Obviously, we're talking about Undead a lot when we're talking about hammers. But most lists have some level of conventional hammers available. Trident Realm kind of doesn't. Again, at least the way I play them. So offensively, because the list is built up of all of these not super hard hitting units, you really have to pick your fights. Um, you know, put volume of attacks into lowish defense units. Put your high crushing, like from the Coral Giant, is a really good candidate for that, into the high defense stuff. And fundamentally, fight like an absolute coward. Like pick extremely unfair fights, uh, freeze up stuff, or just avoid stuff that you don't want to fight, and bully the absolute hell out of critical targets. Uh, when Trident Realm plays fair, they lose. So, um, as a Trident Realm player, I want to really control the engagement in order to best leverage my offense into my opponent's list. So when playing against Trident Realm, I guess stand up to them. Make sure to pick your own fights and sort prevent them from controlling the engagement in that way. The other thing is that it's not a super fast list. Like Knuckers are speed 9, nimble obviously, but there's never more than 3 of them, and they don't really hit that hard. They're more of a utility piece. So there's very limited, like truly fast stuff, but there's plenty of medium speed stuff. So you can expect to play against a Trident Realm list that sort of medium fast. So your infantry, for example, will almost always suffer the charge, but your cavalry, your flying cavalry, anything speed 10 especially, can really dictate the flow of battle, and that's really crucial. So control is, it's always a relevant factor of the battle, but it's especially so for Trident Realm. If for no other reason than Ensnare and Big Shield only work in the front, so uh, flank attacks are super devastating against them. And also because of the sort of moderate durability of the whole variety of units in the list, if you can pick and choose sort of a bunch of one-on-one fights and engage in your favor in that way, chances are you're going to do extremely well as a Trident Realm player. So you can see my little diagram here. It's an extremely arbitrary example, and it's going into some Kingdoms of Men units, which are maybe not that relevant in the meta, but bear with me here. It's just sort of think about the way in which the Trident Realm player, pictured in the top there, has chosen to engage into the numerically superior Kingdoms of Men list. So on the right there, they've got a Thule Mythicon into a Horde of Footguard. In a lot of cases, Trident Realm individuals can absolutely stand up to a Horde for exactly one turn, but one turn is usually all you need. They've chosen to leverage that Thule formation into a regiment, so they can reliably break it and turn towards other units. So as a Trident Realm player, it's super, super critical to, I think about it as freezing the line, where I want to engage as many units in my opponent's sort of battle line as possible, both to restrict their ability to, directly counter punch me in my flank. So, covering arcs, super, super important, but also to really limit their mobility, because with the limited hitting power, you can't always rely on breaking through units in a timely fashion. So you really want to freeze things up in a favorable board position so that you can allow the good math to come out in your favor. So yeah, offensively, you want to um, choose to engage in such a way that it leaves your opponents with really bad options. Defensively, and this is something that Trident Realm also really excels at, is just give your opponent terrible, terrible choices. Like, um, understanding the math is really crucial, particularly with melee 4 units. Coming into your front arc, you're just not in that much danger. Double charges are always a concern, especially with premier hammers like Drakons or whatever. Like if two Drakon hordes go into a Thule regiment, they will break it. But if two Drakon hordes go into a Thule regiment, you're probably in a good position to counterattack them really advantageously. So a Trident Realm player wants to set up to absorb the damage coming in, and you can do clever things like staggering your line in a checkerboard, just standard stuff, really. But limit your opponent's ability to finish the job, counterpunch in such a way to again freeze the line, pick your matchups, etc. And a unit with, say, 10 wounds is just as effective as a unit with 0 wounds, as long as it never has to take a nerve check again in the game. So if you get hit, simply walk away. Don't let yourself get hit again. Go on to fight. Particularly with knockers, they are so deeply fantastic at that. Where take a solid knock on the jaw and then just nimble slide away. So knowing these areas where Trident Realm excels and how they want to, take over, uh, what can you, dear listener, do in response? Well, first and most crucially is finish the job, and by that I mean do not let wounded units survive. A full regiment that has taken 8 or 10 damage, maybe it gets wavered, but then turn 5 or 6, it's back into the fight. That's backbreaking. So you want to make sure that you either get the double charges you need, get the flanks you need, or even just pick off wounded stuff with shooting. Lightning bolt is especially good. Uh, really make sure that you finish the job on those units. Also, don't let the Trident Realm player dictate the flow of battle. Um, when a Trident Realm player can utilize their tools effectively and put the matchups favorably, put their tidal swarm into a giant so that crushing strength 4 is totally worthless, and then put their gigas into glade stalkers so that the accurate volume of attacks isn't doing very much, they're going to be in an extremely good situation. So if you can use your speed, your positioning, your pressure to force the Trident Realm player to make bad decisions or at least compromise on their ultimate desires, you're going to be in a really good situation. And lastly, we've talked about it before, but just do the math, right? Like, um, I know that Math Hammer sometimes gets a bad rap, and like dice are dice, right? Like crazy things happen basically every game sooner or later. But having a solid foundation of what the expected values are for any given engagement, so that you're not just totally flat-footed by a totally average roll is super, super crucial. I mean, everywhere ultimately, but it's way easier to get an intuitive sense for how your units will perform into, the normal stuff. Defense 5, defense 6, you sort of get a feel for that. But particularly when combined with hindered or phalanx, and snare can really skew the numbers in unexpected ways. So take some time and think about it so that you don't get totally blown out. And that's about it. This is the first of my little videos where I use my newfound master's fame to spread my opinions. So yeah, hopefully you enjoyed. I have no idea what I'll go over next time, but nothing else. I'm pulling the ladder up behind me so that nobody else can make the same claim to fame as I did. All right, folks. Thanks for listening. Catch you next time.